New year, new Glenn, and new tech? We're about to show you why the East Coast is the best coast on today's Flame Trench. Roll the intro.
And here we go. We have liftoff.
Propulsion continues to be nominal.
R68 chamber pressure looks good.
Following up. Roger, roll, Atlantic.
Water towers, fly! Yes! They go down to nominal.
Flight downside FD off. Bring in FD off. It's orange!
Oh my god! Oh my god!
Decollage. Look at this! Put that in the big bag,
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together, back to the moon and beyond.
The methane will be igniting in the flare, correct?
Yikes. You good? Sure. We don't need any more of these.
Welcome everybody to the Flame Trench. For those who don't know, this is NSF's weekly show where we go over all of the exciting things happening in spaceflight. And this is a very special episode. Of course, last week we gave a lot of attention to Starship Flight 7, but that wasn't the only heavy lift vehicle that launched. We got to give a little love as well to New Glenn. And what better way to do it than to talk to the team that covered the launch. So this is a Cape Team Flame Trench. I am joined by the awesome people that helped bring you this coverage from the Cape, including D-Wise. D, how's it going?
It is a great day out here. You know, it was a gorgeous launch, a lot of work to do everything we could to cover it, and I'm really excited to talk about it.
Excited to have you here, and also excited to have Max Evans to talk about it. Max, how's it going?
So here it is going and flowing. Yeah, so coming down from that last week, it's honestly, that whole week was an absolute fever dream. I think I can speak for both Dee and I on that part, but yeah, we are very, very excited. Very excited to talk about it. Absolutely.
Oh yeah, and helping to replay some of the awesome views that we had and to bring some cool things to you, we have Kevin Michael Reed pushing the buttons and pulling the levers today. So we've got a lot of exciting stuff to talk about, both with the launch and some of the brand new tech that we're using to actually capture these launch in terms of cameras and some cool robotics. So a reminder, if you have any questions as we go, you can tag us at NASASpaceflight, and we will do our best to answer as many questions as we can. We are also keeping an eye on Starbase, where it seems like some chopsticks are being lifted ahead of the next tower being built. But let's jump right in here with New Glenn. It's been about a week, and I want to know what each of your thoughts are looking back on it. What's the first thing that comes to your mind thinking back to it? Dee, I'll start with you, and then Max.
Oh, it was gorgeous. That has to be my very first thought, because, I mean, we've seen Starship fly, we've seen all these rockets fly. I don't think any of them quite compare to New Glenn. Having its first launch in the middle of the night, that really helped the blue light from it shine. And so it was just a gorgeous, gorgeous launch, and I'm so happy that I got to be there and cover it.
Max, what do you think? What's your first thought when you think back to it?
Just how spoiled we are, really, to cover as many launch vehicles as we do, especially here out of the Cape. I mean, this is the third year in a row we've had a brand new launch vehicle debut. So in 2022, actually, yeah. So in 2022, we had SLS, of course. 2023, we had Terran 1 from LC-16. And then 2024, we had Vulcan. And this year, technically now, since it slipped into January, we have new Blue Origin's New Glenn. So, yeah, that whole week was, it's still kind of a blur. And it was a lot. It has been a lot to process and digest, especially considering that it did end up flying. And with it being at night, I know a bunch of us were a bit, I guess, pessimistic about how it might look at night, because it's a lot more difficult to shoot a Methalox rocket at night with how much dimmer the exhaust is compared to a Keralox or an SRB powered rocket like Vulcan or Falcon 9 or Atlas 5. But oh my goodness, that could not have been any more spectacular for the conditions that we had. And I think so to tie in Starship a little bit into this, we saw that one video from I think it was Flight 5 of the ship performing its landing burn in the ocean from a buoy, and the light coming down from each of the sea level Raptors acted like a spotlight. Like there was just this cone of light coming down onto the ocean. And that is exactly how New Glenn looked, albeit like 7 times brighter because the BE-4s are bigger than the Raptors, and there was, of course, 7 of them. So on wider views, it was a bit more difficult to tell from a tighter track or any tighter punched-in imagery. But from this angle, I'm actually be really great at that. There is this cone of light coming down from the bottom of the rocket, like this gigantic spotlight. And I think with the clouds being in the way that they were, yes, it obstructed the view downrange, but it helped to bounce the light back up off, like from the ground, off the clouds and back onto the ground to make things that much brighter and spectacular on the ground. It was absolutely, I know I've said it like 8 times already. So if we're doing if we're taking a shot every single time I say spectacular, everyone's gone. But it was nothing short of spectacular. I was just super glad to see it finally leave the ground.
I mean, I think that was the other big thing is we're all wondering, oh my gosh, is it going to launch? It kept slipping a little bit. Obviously, we had the attempt earlier in the week, too. I mean, for you, I know when it scrubs, it's very disappointing. But considering this is a brand new rocket that we've never seen fly before, was this kind of a good test in a way to have that scrubbed experience ahead of time? Or would you rather have just gone on that first try, Max? Sorry, you go first.
I am incredibly glad that it scrubbed on its first attempt, because that gave us the opportunity to deploy some new gear. It wasn't something that we could risk trying for the first ever time with a launch for New Glenn. That's too important. We can't risk that sort of thing. We need to make sure that we have solid tracks. Because it delayed, we had another mission that we were able to give it a try on, which you are watching right now. And so that was basically 24 hours before liftoff of New Glenn, and it worked spectacularly there. And so we were able to put in the time to deploy the new system for New Glenn without risking, like we knew that it worked at that point. And this is going to be very beneficial in improving our coverage moving forward.
Yep, that first test, of course, was the Blue Ghost mission, of which, there you go, there's a patch. I'll put it back up now that we're full screen. There you go. The patch is now me. I am the patch. But, yeah, I got to see it ahead of that launch. All of a sudden, I'm up at the hut and I look and there's just all these green flashing lights and this crazy tech. I'm like, what are we doing now? And then obviously seeing the result is crazy. But I feel like you mentioned it. We gotta talk about it. The technology that we used for New Glenn and tested with the Blue Ghost mission is bonkies to say the least. Can you kind of tell people what this whole tracking rig is?
Yeah, so this, you can see it behind me right here. It is a Vinton Radamec FHR-145 robotic head. And so with that, we're able to mount all of our cameras onto the plate right there. And rather than controlling it by hand, where we're limited by our muscles, by any little shaking of the cold, we can control it with a control panel like this and a joystick. So, I mean, it's hard to describe how great it is to use it, but you basically can just use the joystick and have incredibly fine control over all of its movement. So you can see it moving in the background there. And it really, I mean, I've now used it for 2 launches. Max has used it for a launch so far. And you're able to control the rate at which the joystick makes that move, so you can do like exponential rates. So you have really, really fine control right in the middle, so you can get a slow pickup off the pad, and then you can track it as the rocket moves to higher speed. And so, of course, we've got such a great team to be able to make stuff like this work. So Das picked this stuff up actually broken and spent a ton of time diving into exactly how it all works, getting it all put back together so that it would work for us, because all of this was broken. And it's really great to use it to enhance our coverage.
Yeah, Das pointing out that, as you mentioned, it was picked up scratch and dent, and then it was fixed. So it was that's how we were able to make part of that happen. But Max, as someone who's done a lot of this tracking, I mean, I don't think people realize how sensitive, especially when you zoom in as much as we do for these, how sensitive these tracks are. I mean, back in the shuttle days, for those large trackers, you could tell someone's heart was racing because you could see the camera slightly shake to their heartbeat.
Yeah, and it wasn't so. The real benefit of using a tracker head like this is just being able to have something much more sturdier to mount the camera, or cameras, plural, too. It's a much more solid surface, and because of the motors inside and how you can control it, you can be a lot smoother with your inputs. And one of the things is, especially if you're shooting at 1,000+ millimeters, as we often do for a lot of our tracking cameras, if you bump the head, or if you, the tripod heads have a rod that you use, and obviously you use that to pitch the head up and down. If you breathe on it the wrong way at times, especially if you're punched in super tight, or if it's windy, or if you're super cold and your hand is shaking, that comes through in the imagery, and of course you get a lot of that shake, which you see, which is kind of headache inducing, but sometimes it's the best we can do. And so the real benefit of using a head like this is it is super smooth, it is super gradual, and it is a lot more sturdy than even a ton of tripods that we often use. So yes, it was a big investment to pick it up, and we cannot thank Das enough for doing it and fixing it up and making it available for us to use here at the Cape. But it just comes in, it is so handy when you have to have, I think, 1, 2, or 3, sometimes more cameras, depending on what either of us want to do, especially if you want to mount like a telescope to it where you're punched in at like 2,000 millimeters or beyond at times, depending on the telescope or optic you're using. Because it is super critical to me. It is super, just like that. Just like that.
Showing off a giant telescope.
There's no tracking by hand with a telescope like this.
Yes.
This is 2,000 millimeters by default with the Micro Four Thirds. It's like 4,000 equivalent. And so, I mean, if you touch that thing, the frame moves, you no longer see what you're looking at.
Yes.
And so you were talking about the arms. So like this is a more typical tripod that you would be used to. And even when you have these arms that extend out, those help you get a much smoother track, but you're still limited by what you can physically do. And as the weight shifts, we've got massive lenses on these things. So then you're adjusting how much weight you're physically holding throughout, because you're at some points pointing almost straight up. And these tripods, so you got is that the 60 to 600?
It is. And this lens alone, just for perspective, weighs 9 pounds, which is more than a lot of lenses and cameras put together. So it's not a small unit. 9 pounds.
Yeah. This gear is not light. That is the easy way to put it. And yeah, that tripod, you see how massive it is to help deal with that weight. And for example, like during the Blue Ghost launch, Dee was tracking with the crazy mount there with the joystick, and I had the physical tripod there where you're tracking it and you're moving it. Of course, every little tap, you see it kind of shake when you're that zoomed in and you're going that far. And it doesn't help when it's actually cold. Well, for Florida, it's cold. Sorry, Max.
No, I mean, it's just true. I mean, you live here, you know it. So does Steve. Like, we all live here. I mean, if it's like below 60, some of us are kind of chilly, and it's been in the 40s here at times, which is genuinely cold. But Sawyer, I think this is actually your track from the Blue Ghost mission on screen.
Yeah,
right now,
you can already see just a little bit of the shake. It's not dramatic, but it's enough that when you're talking about getting super punched in and super zoomed in, it really makes a difference. So like watch as it goes up and then it zooms in on it. You'll see just how tight you have to get and then the slight shake as you're tracking it. Because, I mean, yeah, the rocket's moving pretty smooth, but then you're also trying to move with it on the tripod. And at one point, I'm like this. Just you rotate around and crunch your neck to try and keep going with it. It's not as easy as it looks, I'll tell you that. But that's where the robot, I think, comes in with the benefit.
Right, so cool though.
You guys put my tracks to shame. I'm just saying. But
well, we've had a bit more practice, Sawyer. So don't be selling yourself short.
So
how does that compare then? Let's say to the hand track.
So with the robotic tracker here, we can do things like put a whole bunch of different focal length cameras on the same tracker. So one of the ways that I've been starting to use that, and I look forward to doing that even more so, is that camera on the far right. That's my super telephoto shot, and so that's running in slow motion. But then my camera in the middle, I'm able to run that at a lower frame rate in order to see stuff like the second stage interactions, and we can see the RCS firing after stage separation during nighttime Falcon 9 launches. And that also helps if you are going to the crazy focal lengths like the telescopes, then you're able to use that as a reference camera. If you keep the Falcon 9 in the center of that screen, it's a lot easier to re-find it with your super telephoto stuff if you have a wider shot eventually, because if it passes through clouds, it's easy to lose a rocket in the sky if the conditions aren't perfect. So that all just helps make it so you can really find what you're looking for.
I was about to ask how you actually keep it in the frame when you have three different cameras at three different zooms, basically. How you do that? Because, I mean, in terms of, like, when I was tracking, I used the little screen that comes with our broadcast camera. I know other cameras, there are HDMI attachments that you can have a larger monitor on the side. So how exactly do you keep that centered? How does it compare to the other cameras that we've been using?
Yeah, so it's actually pretty similar to the ones like we have been using. So this is to give you an idea of the different focal lengths. The tightest one is on the bottom left, and then I've got the wide shot above that and a slightly middle range shot in the upper right, and then some behind the scenes stuff. But what I was doing is I had two different monitors. I had one with the shot in the bottom left, and I had one with the shot in the upper right. And so those were able to be used for my reference throughout flight. So as stuff went behind clouds, I was actually able to reacquire the second stage of New Glenn during the launch. And it was just, I mean, I don't know how to describe this launch. You can really see that flashlight effect that Max was talking about in either the upper left or the bottom right shot here. It really just shines that blue light down.
That really was like one of the most spectacular things that maybe you or I have ever seen. I mean, on top of just seeing New Glenn fly for the first time and how that just watching the actual body of the rocket move for the first time after seeing it just stationary for months, being able to see it fly like this. And this just shows how vibrant the exhaust is from a Methalox-powered engine compared to a Keralox or even a Hydrolox. Because you get a lot more of the blues and a lot more of the purples depending on how the engine runs. We know that the BE4 runs on an oxygen-rich stage combustion cycle, which leads the exhaust to, I guess, ironically, be this more bright, like royal blue color. Whereas on the Raptor is a full flow stage combustion cycle engine. So, which leads to the exhaust resulting in the exhaust being a lot more purple reddish. So this just I can't get over it. This was already a week ago. Like how was this already a week ago? Honestly, I'm just rewatching it now. It doesn't. We say it all the time, but it doesn't get old. And that this is what we are able to do, and this is what's happening at the Cape now. Like even 5 years ago, it was pretty difficult to fathom that there would be this kind of boom here at the Cape. Figuratively,
Exactly. Or that it would be that cold, which, by the way, Max, there was a poll that just wrapped up. Max's idea of cold, 80% say your idea of cold is hilarious. 19% say, I agree, anything sub 70 Fahrenheit is chilly.
Thank you.
I will
Thank you
say
very much.
the night of New Glenn was properly cold. We were on a pier over water, so in addition to it just being a cold temperature, it was very, very humid. It was frigid. We were out there for 9 hours, 10 hours.
Just sounds about right. Well, a long time either way.
And I will say, I did see Next Tonic in chat with the recommendation to put the heaviest lenses closest to the robotic arm. That is definitely the ideal case, and we are working on a few things to do that. Max, don't you already have something pretty cool to help mount all these cameras?
I do. Speak of the devil, and he shall appear. So this is what we call. So DOS came up with the idea called a CHAOS plate, even though, like, I'm not quite sure how to explain that because you kind of have to be a real nerd about this stuff to understand it. But there are these plates that you can buy commercially called cheese plates, and they're basically mounting plates like these with a ton of drilled holes in them to mount anything you want, whether it be multiple cameras, microphones, GoPros, anything you need. But this one was custom made by DOS. Thank you, DOS. For my needs specifically, whether it be to mount it to the Robo Tracker or to have this mounted on a hand tracker. This is made to have up to, I believe, there are ways to mount upwards of 3 cameras on it, which is a lot. I agree, but more cameras, more better, as Jack would probably say. And this is what D was using as well, because D's plate isn't ready yet. This is what D was using for both Blue Ghost and for New Glenn. It's basically just a big chunk of metal, super thick, super rigid, and so there shouldn't be any flex or any play, even if this is mounted to a hand track tripod. But these are the kinds of tools that we use to fire as many cameras as we possibly can for the launches as important as NG1 was, and I think the results pretty much speak for themselves.
Yeah, and just to tease, like you said, my plate is actually in production right now. Potentially we'll get a look at it in a little bit. But that plate that DOS is making is going to be able to support a telescope on it and the 400 or 800 millimeter equivalent lens and 2 more cameras slung underneath it. And in that layout, it will have the heaviest cameras closest to the arm and vice versa. So it's quite... that is a super close-up of the plate being made on the other side of the screen there. But at some point, we may get another view of that. It's really exciting to continue getting these tools. And gosh, thanks so much, DOS.
DOS is like our dad pretty
it's not
much
on the
at
plate
this
yet.
point.
That's why it doesn't look good. It's not, the camera's not on the plate. The plate's being made.
Yeah, if the plate were there already, then it'd be fine.
Also, I see people saying that it needs to either be called the DOS plate or the DOS cheese grater.
The DOS cheese grater sounds a bit aggressive. I don't know. The DOS plate, though, that would be good. But DOS himself literally called it the CHAOS plate, which is because it's bigger and thicker than a cheese plate. I think CHAOS fits. So I think
CHAOS?
I think for CHAOS, like CHOZ, CHAOS.
Is that like
Don't
chunky
ask me.
cheese?
Basically.
Which sounds like a terrible amusement or a terrible birthday party place to have it a chunky cheese instead of Chuck E. Cheese.
I don't like that.
No,
I don't like that one bit.
Yeah, like
yeah, you can see that. Go ahead, D.
No, I was just going to say there's a different angle as the plate is under manufacturing. Like, we wouldn't be able to have all these tools new. It's like, because we've got such a wonderful team who can fix things and make them, like, that's the way that we're able to do all this.
Yes, and for those asking, this is a CNC machine. This is not a 3D printer. Which, Dee, can you kind of explain the difference?
Yeah, so a 3D printer, which some of you are probably familiar with, is what's called additive manufacturing. So it has a nozzle, and there are different types, but I'll keep it simple. A 3D printer builds up material. So most of the time, it's plastic getting laid down, and then another layer of plastic that gets laid down. Whereas a CNC machine is subtractive manufacturing. I'm not sure if that's the exact right word. But so you start with a larger chunk of material, and then that machine goes through and cuts away at it. And so additive manufacturing is like the newer thing here, but CNC taking away the material is how DAS has been able to design these plates and get them made. And then, so with a pass on the CNC machine to get a lot of things started, and then using a drill press, I believe, to get all these holes custom tapped for all the specific cameras that we need to cover. And I'm being told that the 3D printer is going right now too, apparently.
Oh boy. There's a reason we don't have the audio playing for that. Between the two machines, it's, I'm sure, quite loud.
Oh, yeah.
Also, someone's saying CNC should stand for Casual Numpty Converter. I think Chris P would approve of that.
Depends on the context, I guess, but...
True. Speaking of context, I do want to take a second here. This is the transmission makes no sense, but I want to thank some people. How about that? A better transition would be, we couldn't do what we do without the help of people like you who support the stream. Center, thank you for becoming a PadRat member. Space Pope, the Space Pope, with the $50 super chat, bless this trench, and the amazing works of Max and D. I agree. Snot Garden saying DY, Sawyer, and Max, the dream lineup, and thank you, Kevin. So Kevin gets a mention in there too, and we also got a half-second DOS cameo now too. Anonymous getting an item from the store, in fact, getting one of Max's prints, saying, thanks, Max, for capturing this holy glow. And it's not anonymous, it's the Space Pope again. Let's see which print of Max's we got here, see if it pops up.
Oh, is it the new one?
That could be.
I'm curious.
Yeah, it's not showing up, but it says Max print, so.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Aramil with the £2 for D's Pink Tape Fund, which I think we need to explain that. For people that were in the members' Discord, which is for Capcom and above, we were doing the pre-show, and we were talking about and ordering D's Pink Tape during the pre-show.
Hold on, I can grab a battery that happens to have some pink tape. I've got a different battery that has some pink tape. I've got a case with some pink tape on it.
Is there anything you don't have pink tape on?
My new tripod.
Oh, true.
Yeah.
It's too new.
Exactly.
It's too new.
Yep.
Yeah, there are certain, at the Cape we obviously have our gear, and a lot of times we put markings on it to try and denote whose it is, especially if you go out for remote camera setup, things like that. When there's a row of like 60 cameras, you pretty much remember where yours is, but let's say someone has to go pick it up for you. Sometimes, you'll put a special duct tape or something on it. Everything OD's has the pink tape on it, and it is fantastic, and I love it.
It's kind of hard to miss.
Oh, definitely,
Yes.
definitely. It's I go through a lot of pink tape.
We go through a lot of tape in general.
Oh,
Yeah.
Electrical, gaff, duct tape, whatever, everything. Literally
We
everything.
used a lot of gaff tape during New Glenn, actually.
Oh, God, yeah, we did.
Oh.
We sure did. We sure did.
Can you elaborate?
So, as we mentioned a little bit earlier, we were at Jetty Park Pier, and one of the ways we don't rely on just one source for our internet for streams. We need high quality internet. So we had directional antenna, which you can see right over there, which was pointing towards another one to provide internet access out there. And so, of course, because of that, we then have Ethernet cables that were running across the pier. And so the right way to do that is to tape everything down really securely with tape across it and long ways so that nobody can trip. And so we had basically all of our cameras wired up to this point-to-point in addition to all our other sources of internet to provide the most stable stream possible. So I had two of the cameras. I had one of the cameras on the tracker and a camera behind me directly wired up over Ethernet. And then we also had our packs, our tracking cameras, all that sort of stuff, all wired up to provide a feed. But yeah, that was a lot of gaff tape to keep all of those cables secure and safely out of the way.
I think it's also worth noting, too, that that was probably the most extreme we've been in the field for a launch ever. I mean, normally
Absolutely.
we're either here at the, or I say here, I'm at home. We're either at the press site where you are for a launch from any of the pads, 41, 40, or 39A, 39B, or we're at somewhere Cape side, like the two locations that were given. I still don't know if we're allowed to mention. But usually when we're Cape side, we're not there for usually longer than 2 or 3 hours, where when we were out on the pier, we were completely independent and on our own in terms of power, in terms of internet, and the walk down the pier back and forth is not a short walk. It's at least probably a quarter mile each way. I want to say, I could be wrong. I'm just eyeballing it, but it's not a short walk either way. So we had a lot of this stuff to plan and work out in the event that either we lost power on something, we lost internet, we lost the camera. We had to have backups on backups on backups and make sure that everything we had worked. And it took a lot of time and a lot of effort to get everything there. So that's why we were there for 9 or 10 hours on both attempts. So on top of making sure that we had a good spot at the end of the pier, because that's like that was the premier angle, I think, that anyone could have gotten for the launch. We were super grateful to be there for launch, but there was a lot to work out, and thankfully, honestly, I think it's safe to say it worked out pretty well.
And there were also a lot of people, especially on the night of the scrub. So
yes,
we had our wagons of gear. So I think we took 5 or 6 trips delivering gear out, and then another 5 or 6 bringing gear back to the cars at the end of the night.
Yep.
And especially during that first attempt, the pier was packed shoulder to shoulder with people who wanted to see this thing launch, which, I mean, it's incredible to just have that many people so passionate about spaceflight in one location. We see that places like Starbase, but it's not quite as common for us, at least, to see that here, because we're generally like on site, but getting to experience this with a huge community, people who are just passionate about space, people who traveled for this launch, people who work at Blue who happen to be in the area. There were just so many people passionate about it, and there were a ton of you all that came up for patches, which I don't think I have handed out that many patches ever. Like, if you counted up until this point the number of patches I handed out and the number of patches I handed out on the pier leading up to New Glenn's flight, New Glenn's flight definitely had more.
By the way, I just wanted to point out, see, here at NSF, we don't cut through the red tape, we cut through the pink tape.
Oh, jeez.
I haven't made a pun yet. I had to do something.
I was kind of expecting to have Kevin have that groan sound effect.
That's what I was waiting for.
Yeah, I was waiting for that too. Kevin? No? Okay, moving on.
So I gotta, while we're talking about where we're viewing from, you're talking about the pier and everything, kind of put that into perspective. Where is the pier in relation to it? How far away? Obviously, it's very different from our usual launch angles. And so talk a little bit about the setup on the Jetty Park pier. Max, you want to start with that?
Sure. So, in our opinion, the end of the Jetty Park Pier is the best angle you can get for watching a launch from LC-36. And I think you had, besides 39A and Playa Linda Beach, which is closed a lot of the time, which is why I would have to rank anywhere along the beach, whether it be Jetty Park, Cocoa Beach, even going all the way down to even somewhere as far as Satellite Beach. The Jetty Park Pier is only about 5.3 miles from the pad, and it's a clear shot right over the water as long as you're at the end of the pier. And because of how big the complex is with New Glenn there, it feels a lot closer than that. And so that angle is really as good as it can get. It's unobstructed. It is clear. It's a straight shot. And so anywhere but that being said, anywhere on the beach that is south, again, like the beach over at Jetty Park, going down to Cape Canaveral, Cocoa Beach, any of those are still great angles because LC-36 is, I think, the most visible pad that the public can see on a regular basis, regardless of time of day. So, and I think that really helped. And with us being there with a lot of the members of the public on the pier, that just brought everything full circle. And to enjoy that launch with everyone else who was around us, whether it be employees at Blue or just anyone who either traveled or just so happened to be out there to watch, it was a tremendous experience. And the pier itself, for context, is right at the mouth of Port Canaveral. So the Port Canaveral is south of the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, just north of Cocoa Beach. And that is where all the cruise ships come in, whether it be Disney, MSC, let's see, who else is in there? I can't remember, but off the top of my head, I can't remember. But that is where all the cruise ships come in. That is where a lot of the marine hub is for any of the marine activities around the east coast of Florida, minus Miami. And that's also where SpaceX and Blue Origin have all of their fleet for booster and capsule recovery. Well, used to be capsule for SpaceX, since Megan and Shannon have both since relocated to Los Angeles. Boo. But there is a ton of activity over by Port Canaveral, which makes the pier over at Jetty Park one of the premier spots, not only to see a launch from any pad, but to see a booster coming back to port on top of a drone ship. Because, again, the pier is right there and the water is right there. There's no obstruction minus the water itself. So it's a front row seat to ships going out, ships coming back, boosters coming back. So, D, anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, it was just a great view, and of course, Max and myself were on the pier, but we also had Julia, who was over at Cars Park to provide a totally different angle than we were getting, and Jerry farther back in the clear airspace with the drone. Like, it was a huge team effort to get all of this up and going to provide the best coverage possible for New Glenn.
Yeah, we had as many assets as we could out there to make it happen. It was spectacular. Now, I do have to actually talk about the rocket and the launch, because I know a lot of people aren't as much fans about talking about the camera, but we all love talking about the rocket. So I want to make sure we get some rocket questions in here.
Yes.
Here's one from Nam, who said, who has the fastest takeoff? And I think it's safe to say, before we hit who has the fastest, I mean, I think this is up there as one of the slowest takeoffs we've ever seen. And that's coming for a person who does slow-mo.
Oh, yeah. It was crawling. Like, to the extent, just a tiny part of me was like, is something going wrong? Like, I knew it was going to be slow at liftoff. And this is some slow-mo of mine at liftoff. But I knew it was going to be slow, but it felt almost concerningly slow off the pad. But what do you know? That was just fine. It went to orbit. Like, it was incredible to... God, I just keep saying it was incredible. How do you describe stuff like this? It was such a beautiful mission, and it was, like you said, an incredibly, incredibly slow liftoff off of the pad.
It must have had a thrust to weight ratio of like 1.1 or 1.2. Like it was that slow. I think so there's a documentary that came out, and I think in the mid 90s by the Discovery Channel called The Space Shuttle. And it talks about the space program up to that point, which granted that was almost 30 years ago. Crikey. But at that point, there was an engineer called Tip Talone, and he was talking about how it looked watching the I cannot say it without stuttering, the Saturn V rocket lifting off from 39A or 39B, and just how slow it was crawling off the pad and how it just kind of held on to you as it was leaving the pad. That's how this felt. New Glenn was, again, it must have had a thrust to weight ratio of like 1.1 or 1.2. It was crawling. And it didn't help with the fact with the exhaust bouncing out of the flame trench and bouncing off of all the infrastructure on the pad itself, giving that orange glow that we saw. That's what that was. With the amount that was flashing and how bright that was, that almost made it look like there was something going wrong with one or more of the VE4s. And with how low that thrust to weight ratio presumably is, there is no engine out capability for New Glenn for the first 90 seconds of flight or so, at least. Now, that is not public information. That's just assumptions based on what we can see and roughly calculate. But yeah, it really just grabbed onto you. And there was a couple of seconds there where I think we all wondered, is something going wrong? Like, what is happening right now? But yeah, obviously we can see it got off the ground just fine. And I think what's obvious from the streak shot that was just posted is how quickly it actually ended up pitching over and going down range. It also didn't help the fact that night that it was quite windy. So I'm sure the wind probably helped it out, or I shouldn't say helped it out, but the wind maybe moved the rocket more than they wanted it to coming off the pad. And so I'm sure the BE4s had some compensation to do with keeping it online. But yeah, it pitched over really early, like way earlier than I would expect for a rocket accelerating that slow off the pad. And to answer your question earlier, Sawyer, I think one of the quicker rockets to leave the pad right now is probably an Atlas V with the 551 configuration, which is 5 solid rocket motors, a 5-meter fairing, and only one RD-180 on the upper stage. Watching a 551 leave the pad is like watching an ICBM take off. Like, it is that quick. And it pitches over very aggressively right off the pad, which is what Blue Origin looked like to do with New Glenn, immediately clearing the tower. But again, it was so slow. I know we've probably said that a million times so far, and I'm sure everyone else has seen the footage too, but that was a launch experience that I don't think any of us have ever really had before, let alone something that we anticipated like seeing. Because again, with this being a brand new rocket, we had no idea and no reference to how this might look other than Terran 1, which was a fraction of the size.
Yeah, and you mentioned it was windy. And
yes.
If I'm totally honest, I think I forgot to take off my headphones during the launch. I think I was still listening to comms like the whole time. So the sound was incredible. It was an incredibly powerful rocket. I feel like I should have taken off my headphones and like totally just been there in the moment. It was a long night.
That was a long night. That was a long couple of nights for everyone else on the team, because again, Starship did end up flying technically on the same day. So
yeah. And the night before, we were out until probably 3:30 when we left the press site the night before, and we had remote set up at 9 a.m. that morning.
Yep.
And then we also had remote pickup right after New Glenn launched. So
yeah, I left at 2:30 and you guys were still there. So hey, check out this picture. This is a really cool one. Wouldn't it be awesome if this was a metal print?
Maybe.
I think it would be.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's safe to say we have never seen this BE4.
I want to make you proud,
I would like to point out, I did not come up with that title, as much as I want to take credit for it. Max, who came up with the pun in the title of this new metal print at shop.nasaspaceflight.com?
That was me. I will wholeheartedly own that. That was entirely me who came up with that title. But like it's low hanging fruit. Like BE4, like come on. Like that's just waiting to be like turned into something. But yes, this was captured with one of my remote cameras that was about a little under 3/4 of a mile from the launch pad. Actually, if you give me a second, let's see here. It was this very camera right here, and this very camera and lens combination. So this is a Canon 80D, as you can see, and this is paired with a Sigma 100 to 400 millimeter lens. And this was punched into, including the crop factor of the body, because it's not a full frame camera. I think it was at about 400-ish millimeters equivalent. So it was punched in pretty tight, and that was the whole point of getting the shot, was because you obviously had to be super tight to catch it, but also it was difficult to come up with a method to expose for, because again, we've never seen a Methalox rocket fly at night before other than Terran 1, which again is a super scaled down version ish of New Glenn in terms of propellant type and also just size. So, and we of course didn't have remotes for that. And having the background knowledge of how much dimmer Methalox is, it was really difficult to come up with a, I guess, exposure equation, I guess you could say. But I'm just really glad the shot worked out. And the cameras did great, despite being knocked over by the wind like the day before launch. It was the weather. So for the first attempt, the weather was, I think it was okay. The clouds were coming in and out, but there really wasn't that much wind. The water was super calm. But for the second attempt and the days leading up to it, it was like super, super, super windy and cold. And because it was so windy, I think I had 4 cameras placed at the spot that was about 3/4 of a mile from the launch pad. All 4 of my cameras were literally blown over and were laying down when we went to go reset. So I'm really glad that it didn't go on the first attempt, because I wouldn't have gotten anything from that spot, let alone the images that you're seeing, thankfully, in the store. But we went out to reset. Everything, thankfully, was healthy. -1, I had to pull one camera because the cable for the actual sound trigger that it uses, called the Wallops, was broken and not functional. So I had to pull that camera, but I still had 3 more there. This 80D, my 5D Mark III, which captured the image that you saw on your screen just a little bit ago. And then my Zcam E2 M4, which was the first, I think, which is actually the footage that you were about to see on your screen. It was my first time putting any sort of video camera or cinema camera out for remotes ever. And video remains a domain that I still have a lot to learn with. I mean, I'm brand new. But playing back now, it's playing back at about 120 frames a second. That's why it's so slow. But you will see, hopefully, just how glorious the plumes are from all 7 BE4s going at full thrust, in contrast with the orange glow of against the plume, and with how blue, ironically, the exhaust of the BEs actually is. So,
By the way, I just want to mention, you're talking about how slow it is. There is a poll right now. New Glenn launch was slow or so slow? Those are your options.
Well, extra
By the
slow
way,
now,
can you
but with this playing back super slow.
Can you put that camera back on screen a sec, Max?
Sure.
First off, I have to say with the lens, what the Sigma?
Oh, jeez, Sawyer.
Secondly,
Oh, my goodness.
you mentioned the MyOps and remote and all that.
Yes.
You've got the trigger right on top of the camera there. For people who don't know what we're talking about and how those remote cameras are set up and work, that is a sound trigger, right?
This is. So this little device here on the very top is what's called a MyOps Smart, and it is a commercially available device that anyone can get. And it is programmed. There are different modes that are set into that are already built into it to fire your camera remotely, hence the term remotes. Lightning, sound, time lapse, and a handful of others, but we never use those. So we primarily have these triggers for their sound mode, and because, of course, rockets are very loud, it is the perfect method for triggering these cameras, which are placed remotely around different launch pads, hence the term remote cameras. And we are very graciously offered that opportunity by either the launch service providers that are launching out of the Cape, whether it be SpaceX, ULA, now Blue Origin, or even NASA at times now too, with their various missions. They allow members of the media to go out and put cameras around various facilities and locations around different launch pads of whatever's flying. And so obviously you can't be out there yourself when the launch happens, otherwise, unless you want like permanent hearing damage, or if something goes wrong and you just end up unaliving yourself, that would not be good. So these cameras need a way to fire by themselves when the launch is happening, and that's what these little devices allow us to do. So they come in real handy. They can be a little bit finicky at times. I know there have been some software. Yeah, there have been some software issues in the past. I think like 2 or 3 years ago, there was an update that just caused them to not work at all. But thankfully, MyOps has done a really good job since then, making sure that all of the all the software and the updates that have gone into it, make sure that it functions smoothly and as it should. And to this point, I mean, I run all my original MyOps that I got anywhere from 2 to 4 years ago, and they're still working great. They're still kicking. So on top of the cameras that are made by Canon, they're built like tanks. I mean, obviously these were all literally knocked over from being up like 3 to 4 feet off the ground, and they still work perfectly. That's why I love Canons. They're built like tanks.
Yeah. I mean, hey, I've had my Nikons out there with the MyOps on it as well, and I have not, knock on wood, lost a camera for tankiness, we'll say. Stupidity, yes. Tankiness, no.
We have stories about yeah. I think we have some stories around Vulcan's first flight, don't we?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean Vulcan's first flight. There was the first attempt for OFT-2 when it didn't even launch, but I still lost a camera in a MyOps due to incredibly bad weather and rain.
Oh, that's right.
That's how I lost one.
During Vulcan. So in this instance, I think our cameras were about half a mile from the pad for New Glenn.
It was closer to about 3/4, but yeah, otherwise not very close. Yeah.
And so at that distance, they're pretty safe, although there were like some buildings that did have glass shattered that were behind the cameras. But for cameras, that's pretty okay. When they start getting really close, like you can set up at Slick 41, you're risking a little bit more damage. So cameras getting thrown and destroyed, and a lens getting torn in half, and a MyOps getting split open, which all of those happened to me on Vulcan Flight 1.
Yeah. A lot of cameras did not make it through that launch.
That was a really rough time for a lot of photographers and videographers, because we had a rough understanding of how the exhaust out of the flame trench and around the GSE, or the ground service equipment, like functioned and behaved for Atlas. And we thought for Vulcan it wouldn't be much different. But because of how much wider Vulcan is compared to Atlas, especially with the solids on the sides, the exhaust does a lot more. I should say, the wind that is. How do I say this? Brain no worky.
I will say, I think part of the reason the cameras got wrecked so much is because we were nervous about Vulcan, and so we moved them farther away. But I think the airflow and the way the exhaust gets directed in that way once the rocket gets up above the pad was just a lot worse for them.
Yes.
So my camera was a solid 40 feet away from where it was staked into the ground.
Yeah, and mind you, at Slick 41, ULA is very kind in allowing us to set very, very close to the flame trench. Not pun intended. I promise. That was not intended, I promise. We can set really close to the flame trench and the rocket at 41, which means great imagery if everything works. But at the same time, because you are so much closer, your cameras are at a lot higher risk of getting damaged. And what happened to me was I had 3 cameras at that one spot. I did not do a great job at diversifying my shots for Flight 1. I had underestimated what the exhaust could do. But I had two of my cameras that were flown at least 60 feet from where they were set. One of which was actually, if I may pull this up really quick, was my Canon 5D Mark III. Again, Canons are built like tanks. So I was just super lucky that the only damage that was done to this camera was on the actual battery grip itself, which attaches below the camera here. So all I had to do was replace that, and I think I got a new lens, but this was because of a separate occasion. But yeah, if you set too close to a rocket, a lot of bad things can happen. And I think we saw just how violent and large the plume was leaving the flame trench at LC-36. That if we had any cameras there or anywhere near close to the pad, because of course how slow New Glenn was off the pad, there may have been some damage done to our cameras depending on where we were set. So I consider us lucky for being able to set up half a mile, quarter mile away this time.
That's fair.
Yeah, that's a good point. And again, here's a reference photo, by the way, that I took from the proto flight for Kuiper, which is an Atlas. Yes. That's where we're talking about setting up these cameras next to the flame trench. They are ridiculously close. When you come back from launch, where that flame trench actually diverts, there is a ton of dirt, debris, pieces of concrete that end up just on the road there. It's quite violent. Yes. And yes, we put our cameras that close and risk them anyway. Yes, and more often than not, because if you study how the exhaust behaves out of the flame trench again, especially depending upon how the Atlas rocket is configured, whether it be 2 solids, 4 solids, 5 solids, which is the most extreme version, if you put your cameras in the right spot, generally speaking, you're going to be okay. But going back out to the pad after a 5 solid Atlas is flown, not only is there foam and concrete and just stuff spread all over the launch pad, your cameras are covered in a substance that is very irritating to your skin. And it's the exhaust particulates that have mixed with the sound suppression water and turned into hydrochloric acid, which is not great to have on your skin. But also because of that's everywhere across the pad. And because it's everywhere, the whole pad has this very pungent and unique smell. Like it smells like car batteries almost.
It's acid, it's metal, it's all that stuff. And it's terrible, but at the same time, it's like you smell that and you're just like, someone went to space today.
Yeah. It's one of those super extreme, like pungent smells that like you don't want to be smelling for a long time, but it's like, okay, this is cool. Yeah, your fingers are definitely quite tingly if you touch it without gloves. Ask me how I know. Yes, yeah, I highly recommend whoever goes out to Select 41 following an Atlas with solids launch. If you're handling cameras and they're covered in stuff, use gloves. Thank me later. And don't touch your eyes afterwards either. Yeah, I'm trying to see if somewhere I have a photo. I know I have a photo somewhere of the lens covered in all of the junk left over from those solid rocket motors. It's quite crazy. It's pretty disgusting, actually. And if the front elements of your lenses aren't like covered with like a filter or like a clear filter, and you don't get the residue wiped off quickly enough, it can actually damage and like pit the front glass element on the lens, which might not show up initially after one time. Like it looks pretty bad, but as long as you aren't shooting at a super high aperture where that would be in focus, you should be okay. But after a while, if you aren't careful and you don't clean your stuff, it can really damage your equipment. On top of the fact that if your cameras aren't like staked down and you're super close and it gets blown away, like ours were for Vulcan's first flight, it can lead to a bad day. Yeah, very, very true. But what makes it a good day is people helping to support what we do here at NSF. Mark getting the the Starship Flight 7 mug saying go NSF. I watch as much as I can. Thanks. Well, thank you. Chromatic Order, thank you for gifting a Red Team membership. Pat getting a patch pre-order. Saying buying my patch today to add to Dee's tally. All of you do awesome work with such dedication. Thank you. And then someone named, there you go. And then someone named Rough Riders Show, who may or may not be coming to Cape Canaveral, who may or may not be
about to mess up the schedule, saying, so if I scrub launches...
Spoilers!
So if I scrub launches, that means on launch attempt number 2, you won't forget anything, right? Bird, 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 bird.
I hope not.
No scrubbing launches, okay?
You don't use the S word on a launch day.
No.
That is very true. We've learned that the hard way. Now, what impresses me the most, I mean, there's a lot of things, but one thing that's impressive is, yes, we get the really awesome close-up engine shots with their motes. But when you're able to get those really close-up engine shots just during the launch from afar, I mean, I think you nailed it on New Glenn, just saying.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, this level of detail would not be possible without a tracker like this. So I did do a little bit of stabilization in post, but my favorite thing about this shot is that you can see 7 individual mock diamonds, one for each of the engines, and then a bit farther down, you have a mega mock diamond. I feel like that's the best of both the worlds. You get all the little ones, and because the exhaust is clear, you're able to see the massive diamond a bit farther down. Now, looking at like Max's image, it seemed like right off the pad at first, it almost had more of the individual mock diamonds, and once it started to get even just a little bit higher, it seemed like we got the larger singular mock diamond from the second one onward. But yeah, so that is with a 400 millimeter lens, actually, with a micro four thirds, so it's at 800 equivalent, and then on top of that, it is cropped and stabilized more in post. But using things like a telescope and putting that on there, as we are going to start doing very shortly, we should be able to get shots a lot closer to that just with no extra cropping, live during launch. Hopefully, fingers crossed. So
I can't get over how vibrant that exhaust is. It is remarkable.
It's not orange.
It was so cool that, I mean, yes, we've been saying it's blue, but also when it was right down by the pad, it wasn't just blue. It's like we had an orange glow until it started to clear the pad.
I can keep looking at that. It's stunning. By the way, don't forget, the first place to see these when they happen right after the launch is on the NSF socials. So if you're not following on X, Facebook, Instagram, all of those, make sure you are, because then you'll get to see these when they first come out, and you get to say first, and it's stunning. See the priorities on that one, right?
Did I hear D say that I'm going to get telescope shots for launches? What?
I think I kind of teased it a little bit. But I've got this telescope that as soon as that plate that we saw getting worked on arrives here, will start being used for live tracking shots. This is roughly 2,000 millimeters equivalent, whereas most lenses like top out 1,200 at the extreme high end. But on top of that, I will be putting a micro four thirds camera on it, so it'll be a 4,000 millimeter equivalent focal length. And something else I'm definitely going to try is throwing a teleconverter on here.
I was just about to ask that question. Jeez. I was going to say, can you put a doubler on that?
I sure can. So it was actually that sort of setup just on a telescope mount that I was able to see like astronauts walking out the arm in detail into the Dragon capsule and that sort of stuff. And I was like able to see the videographer in front of them from the press site miles away. So it'll be a little bit of a work in progress, and we'll see how it goes. But hopefully this will be some incredible tracking live as it happens.
I'm so excited.
I'm so excited. Like individual particles of ice on Falcon. Oh my god.
Oh yeah.
Basically.
Oh yeah. Like when you have 8,000 millimeters equivalent, the rocket basically fills the screen. And
at least.
So I'm really excited for of course, the tracking, but then, like, what happens at stage separation? If we can get that in this extreme detail of actually seeing second stage separate up close, seeing that boost back burn start. And now that's going to be one of the other really big benefits of having multiple different cameras on the tracker. I would never be able to choose to track with this, because if I were tracking by hand, it would be shaking all over the place. The moment we would get a boost back burn, the two things would go in opposite directions, and all the plasma would be outside the view. And also, things like telescopes are incredibly dim by comparison to most camera lenses. So if you care about numbers, this telescope is f10 equivalent, whereas like the lens I shoot on is f2.8. So the lens is letting a ton more light. So it's way easier to see stuff like that jellyfish. So there are trade-offs with each piece of equipment, but the extra focal length you can get from a telescope is, I mean, you can't beat it.
No, you really can't.
And they say size doesn't matter with cameras. No? Don't. Okay, moving on. While we're talking about the stage separation, obviously we didn't have a landing of the first stage on Jacqueline with Blue Origin. Have either of you heard any updates on what may have happened or anything going on with the landing?
I mean, as far as we could tell, there may have been some kind of hiccup during the boost back burn, or the boost back burn, the reentry burn, because it follows a very similar an engine ignition sequence to Falcon, as in they start with one engine, they go out to three engines, and then back to one before shutting down. It looks like there was an issue with one of the engines during entry burn. And after that, of course, we lost all data, we lost telemetry, we lost everything on the booster, which is indicative of something going catastrophically wrong. I don't believe Blue Origin has come out and stated why that was or what exactly happened. Would love to see some downrange video from like the crew on Jacqueline to see like what they saw. But as far as we know, obviously the first stage did not make it down to Jacqueline, but there was some kind of rapid unscheduled disassembly of the first stage somewhere along the line, around or just after the entry burn.
Yeah, it's a shame, but hey, there's always Flight 2.
There's always Flight 2.
And that brings us to the next question from all four, I believe that's LX or IX. Have Blue Origin said anything about the next New Glenn launch, and are we still expecting it to launch Escapade? D, any idea?
I don't believe they've said anything in particular. Of course, they're going to figure out exactly what happened, why they weren't able to land the booster, as much as, yes, this was its first attempt. Like, it's not like there was an issue on like launch, but they still need to figure out what happened so they can resolve that moving forward. So I believe Escapade has pushed until 2026.
Yeah, the next Mars transfer window is when that would be. Yeah, it's a bit of a shame, but hey, again, it's a learning experience, and I know once they get through the FAA requirements that they need to do, it'll be fine. Because we now have, it's crazy how many FAA inquiries we have already in just January.
Yeah.
So
no
I want to say real quick, that shot is my remote liftoff shot, and you can sort of see the different color of the exhaust right at liftoff. You have a bit more of that orange. And that is also in the shop.
But yeah, so they were going to have to do the mishap investigation for both Starship Flight 7 and for this one because of that booster landing, right?
Yes. One more time, Sawyer?
Yes, Sawyer, exactly. So, yeah, again, keep an eye on the socials. We've obviously been reaching out to the FAA for updates, and we'll post any that we get there as they continue with both investigations. Here's a fantastic question. and I've been thinking about this one since I saw it, but I'm interested to hear what each of you think. I'll start with you, Max, and then I'll go to you, D, and then I'll answer. James Atkinson wants to know, what is the most important item each of the crew takes to a launch that isn't camera-related? It's a really good question.
My Leatherman multi-tool. That is probably the single most important piece of equipment that I have that is not camera-related, because it has a flathead bit on it, has a Phillips head bit on it, has a knife to cut things with if I need to, scissors, pliers, and I can use it to tighten tripod heads. I can use it to take on and take off mounting plates to the bottom of the cameras. So my multi-tool is for sure, I think, the single most important piece of equipment that I have that's not a camera.
What about for you, D?
So you said camera-related. So
not camera-related.
Yeah. That's that becomes really difficult. I'm hearing accusations that a Leatherman camera-related because you're using it for...
You don't just use it for the camera stuff. You can use it for other things too. It's called multi-tool for a reason, Kevin.
I don't disagree with you, but I mean, I can't even say like point-to-point internet or anything like that, because that's kind of camera-related. So
everything there is camera-related. So, like, how do you answer that question?
Hair ties.
Oh.
I don't know what else I would say that's not camera-related.
But at the same time, your hair tie helps you not focus on your hair to help you focus on the camera. So that's also camera-related.
I think you're really pushing it here, Max.
Am I wrong?
See, I could have gone... I was originally going to say my whole key ring, because I have a little tool here just for taking off plates, and it's really handy. But as far as actually important tools that have no relation to cameras, hair tie, I guess.
I thought you were going to go with your mosquito suit.
Oh, gosh. That's a good one. The mosquito suits.
Yeah.
It's not so much of a problem right now. It's just we need so many layers right now because it's cold. But in the summer, for evening or early morning launches, those mosquito suits are very essential. Although, if I'm going to go down Max's line of reasoning, the mosquito suit makes it so you don't get bit while you're tracking, so that you can track more smoothly. So is that not camera related?
Oh, I mean, I think we need chat to decide on that.
Even our cars couldn't be considered not camera related, because we use those to bring our cameras from place to place. By that definition, I don't know. I'm reaching. I know I'm reaching, but it's still.
So, I mean, technically, you would even say, bug spray, which is probably what I would put on my list, is technically camera related, because then you're not getting eaten alive while you're setting up cameras, but at the same time, it's not, so that when you're sitting there just waiting, you're also not getting eaten alive. Especially the Sawyer.
I'm just looking at. I'm looking at a couple of chats that were just set in the back channel. Oh my gosh! Yes, we should do that. D, when are you shaving your head?
I don't get why people are saying this. I'm not shaving my head ever in my life. Why are you bringing this up?
One of us.
Chris, why did you bring this up? I'm not shaving my head. I'm not cutting my hair.
Hey, if you shave your head, you will never have to worry about needing a hair tie ever again.
No, I'm not shaving my head. I'm not cutting my hair.
Not with the attitude.
Oh, jeez. But yeah, bug spray, and I'm going to be a little sentimental. I'll also say, while I've been recovering from surgeries and things, I've had some fantastic help with getting around and with all the driving and transferring and all the other things that I need assistance with just while I'm recovering still from all these surgeries. So I'm going to go with my dad, who I've been very fortunate with the thanks from NSF to be able to credential at these launches to help me with everything. So I'm gonna put my dad as the essential thing for non-launches or non-camera related stuff for launches. Although, again, technically he does help carry the cameras, so take that as you will. But
Kevin also brought up a good point. Hand warmers, especially at this time of year. Great point. Yes.
But again,
those are definitely camera related, though, because how often do we put those on lenses?
But how often have we been using them on our hands, too, lately?
So that our hands aren't shaking as we track?
Exactly.
So camera related.
Everything is... You just hit the button, everything is camera related now. Everything. There's some tie.
Oh my gosh, yeah, pretty much. And while we're talking about Cape launches, while we have the Cape team here, Case is wondering, when next Vulcan launch? Do we have any updates on that? Because we're talking about BE-4s here and how beautiful they are.
I don't know off the top of my head, so I am going to look on next spaceflight.
I think next spaceflight has one like at the end of Q1, early Q2, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure.
I see a Vulcan VC4 for net May 2025. And before that, there's a net first quarter for a Kuiper Atlas V launch.
Also a 551, which is the most, I guess, potent and most powerful version of Atlas to fly.
Yeah, so check out next spaceflight for all of the up-to-date information.
I gotta ask them, by the way. Because the 551, I believe Tori Bruno has called it the Bruiser, right?
Here's the thing. Here's the thing. The 551, he is on video. He is on a video with Destin at Smarter Every Day calling it the Beast. But it's not officially called the Beast. I can't remember what. The ULA has posted some images of what each variant of the Atlas is nicknamed. And the 551 was not nicknamed the Beast. I think Bruiser was 541. I think.
Was it?
I think so. And like how an Atlas with like no solids is like either a 401 or a 501 and 511 or 411. There's a whole bunch of names. Cheese plate.
Yum.
My plate.
It's alive.
I'm so excited. It's very specifically designed, like one side of it, there's going to be a riser so that the telescope can be mounted. It's perfectly lined up for the mount. I'm so excited.
Look at that. That is live from DAS's CNC machine.
I'm
Beautiful
curious.
Piece of metal.
How long is that one by comparison to mine? I can't remember how long mine is, but I think mine's 18 inches or so.
I think it was 15. It's the full length of a block of aluminum. And
okay.
So that one is going to have 2 cameras mounted on top and 2 cameras mounted underneath it.
Okay. And mind you, I think one thing we haven't mentioned yet is the weight limit that this new robotic tracking head can handle. I think it was about 150 pounds, I think was its limit, and our cameras don't even come close to that, even when we mount 4 or 5 or maybe even 6 onto them. So it moves all these cameras and telescopes and lenses with absolutely no effort. So
I'll just say one word to that last conversation. Context. Anyway, that is the live look at the cheese plate in the works. So that is, I can't wait to actually see that in action at the Cape. Exciting. Apparently Das pointing out a little hanging Chad on the corner. I don't know how many people are even old enough to get that reference here, Das.
I don't get that reference, to be honest.
It only decided a presidential election. It's no big deal.
What?
Now that I pointed it out, it can't be unseen. Sorry, Das. Well, one thing that we can see, it's another piece of metal. We should take a quick look over at Starbase, because we have some action going on over there as well, with another piece of metal being the chopsticks. So we've got, there it is. It's in the air. We got the chopsticks going up there for Tower 2. So What do we know that's different about this as they work on lifting this up? Who wants to take that?
I can start it out. So essentially what we know about the second generation of chopsticks that's going to be utilized both here at the Cape and also at Pad B and Starbase is the main thing visually is they're a lot shorter. And that is so they don't have as much weight at the end of the arms to make closing and opening times a lot shorter. And also it's just unnecessary length and mass and material that you don't need to either catch or lift a ship and booster. So I think that's where that's the main starting point is they're shorter, stubbier even.
Oh no, are we gonna have regular chopsticks and stubby chopsticks now?
Stubby chops.
Stubby chopsticks.
Oh no, what have we just started?
I'm claiming that, I'm trademarking that, stubby chops for the win.
I have to also say, we've all just been saying New Glenn, like the whole stream. We haven't said New Glenn or
Glenny.
Glenny.
Jack would be so disappointed.
Y'all are hired.
Yay! Wait, what have I been for the last 3 years? Not hired? I won't say anything. Don't tell Das, even though he's probably listening. But yeah, so this is exciting, and don't worry, we will have full coverage of all of the chopstick work going on this weekend too. So, because we've got the lift, and then we also have the install, right? We already have one of them, I believe, on there, or at least lifted. This is kind of just to make it a little more even, right?
I guess poised. Yeah, I think that's probably the most appropriate way of putting it. That is going to be such a unique sight, seeing two active towers once Pad B comes online.
Can I just say, those cranes, once you have been near the towers and then you just see a crane that's almost as tall as those towers, seeing it from across the channel here, wow.
Yeah.
That's such a cool sight. Also, I would like to point out there is now a chat command for stubby sticks. Just pointing that out there.
Stubby sticks.
Stubby chops, I believe, is the official command name. Or is it stubby command, or is it stubby chops, or stubby sticks?
Stubby
but it's
chops.
There. Yeah. Thank you very much, Chris Bergen, NASA Spaceflight official, for that. That is fantastic. So that's the thing. Oh my gosh, everyone's putting it now in chat.
Awesome. Yes.
The exclamation point goes before the command, not after the command.
So what is the latest with Cape Starship while we're talking about it, as we take a look at them working at Starbase? What's the deal with our tower? Come on, we want Starship here.
So from what we can see, I think it's ironically the phrase that we have been saying for a long time is that work continues on the orbital launch mount, because as we have seen through our various flyovers through recent months, they have torn down the old legs that were at the base of the tower at 39A, and we presume based on that, and also a lot of the material and new facilities going up at Roberts Road, that they are going to be constructing the brand new, I guess, flame trench designed orbital launch mount for the tower, the launch site at 39A. And so we are seeing a lot of work continue at the base of the tower, I guess, laying foundations, driving piles down into the ground to support construction and support the entire structure once it's up. And we should be flying again soon. Hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. To see what else may or may not be happening over at Roberts Road in terms of the orbital launch mount construction. So that is the latest. Oh, also they tore down, I can't remember off the top of my head if that was a LOX tank or a methane tank that was right in between the fixed service structure at 39A and the Starship Tower. That was also completely torn down. So we have a new skyline, I guess you could say, looking out towards Pad A at the Kennedy Space Center.
I think that was LOX, if I remember rightly. But
I want to say it was LOX too. Yeah.
Which we have a whole lot more of everything going on with SpaceX at 39A. There is a lot more to talk about that I don't even think we can cover, but Alicia absolutely will, with This Week in Spaceflight coming up in just about 15 minutes from now, in addition to other SpaceX news, because the Cape is getting Starship ready, is it not?
Yes, we are like frothing, or like we are. So we are like chomping at the bit, just eager to see any bit of Starship hardware here, because it's a bit. We get jealous of Starbase a lot of the time because obviously that's where all of the big important stuff happens, and that's where all the flights happen. That's all out of Starbase right now. But one thing to keep in mind is a bunch of that is coming over to Florida, both at LC 39A and presumably over at Slate 37 in the next couple of years at least. And we've just seen new plans that I believe Alicia will talk about at TWIS for a new gigabay construction just north of the current Roberts Road facilities, which I guess rivals the size and the layout of the very building that we are seeing in frame now, the vehicle assembly building. It's not quite as big and it's not quite as wide, but it is, once it's fully constructed, it is going to once again change the skyline of how the KSC looks from afar. So lots of really, really cool things happening at the KSC at the moment, and it's only going to get more. Or it's a lot more is going to be happening here in the coming months even.
I'm regretting that I can't see that view with my eyes. The VAB is like right over there, and I don't have a window right there. But that is a gorgeous, gorgeous evening view.
Yeah, the windows at the hut only look out at the launch pads, which, I mean, why would we want to look at those? Come on, we want to see the VAB, right? But yeah, those have a fantastic clear view of 39A and B from where D is currently.
That's why I was looking back there. I was looking at 39A, and yeah, our cameras can see more of the work happening at the launch pad than I can.
Yeah, and those cameras, you can watch them too, live, 24/7, Space Coast Live, right here on NSF. Seamless. Got some more people that I want to... Oh, come on! Come on, Kevin, that was good. That was one of my smoother ones, although that's not saying much. Steve getting a couple items from the shop saying thanks for the great views. Appreciate it. And it's worth pointing out here, we've got some max shots coming in the mix there as well. So there you go. Look at that. Hey, we were just talking about that one. And an important reminder with these shots, not only are you... we love the shop because not only do you get something in return, it's like, hey, we show you support, yeah, we get cool views and things like that, but you actually get something physical that you can have and you can show. But in doing so, you are also supporting the individual photographer that took that picture. So when you go down and it says who took it, and you see the description and all of that, you are supporting them and their work in addition to NSF and getting something cool out of it. So a huge thank you, especially for the people that get the prints too. Cheese plate? Chaz plate? Thank you for coming.
I was just going to say, like...
Also, you could see there the work going on at... you see the work going on there, those views? And by the way, Steve, with a $20 super chat, asking, when 4K stream? And 120 FPS is nice, but it's 2025, so when 1,000 FPS? For me, I love videos with super slow-mo. GoFundMe for a Phantom, question mark? D, when are we getting slower slow-mo?
I have been continually looking at things. So just to provide a little bit of context, 4K streams, in addition to requiring like more bit rate, also add latency. So one of the huge benefits of 1080p streams is that you can see this stuff happening so quickly after. So if you're out there watching a launch along with the stream, you know what's happening basically as it's happening. As far as slower slow motion, I am constantly looking at camera options. You know, at some point, I certainly will exceed 120 as my go-to. I've done 240 on several occasions with the cameras I have. They have some trade-offs quality-wise. If you understand sensors, they do line skipping when you do 240. So some things like ice particles get a little bit colored as they move across the screen. But so there are trade-offs there, but certainly we are always looking for the best way to provide the best coverage to all of you. I don't know, honestly, though, if a Phantom is the move based on the way Phantoms work. Those have a buffer. So when we're shooting a launch, we basically need minimum 8 minutes of continuous recording. And with a Phantom, it varies, but especially when you're going for the super high frame rate stuff, it'll fill up a RAM buffer and then you have to wait for it to write. So you can't just record continuously like you can with most types of cameras. And that's a common thing with a lot of slow-mo cameras.
That file size is also going to be massive.
The thing is, because they're limited by their buffer, you might only, if you have like a 256 gig buffer, if you can fill that up 3 times in a launch, okay, then you're at 750 gigs. And yeah, I probably have about a terabyte for most launches that are of anything more than a Starlink.
Yeah, that's the other thing, is you're limited to that. And if you're talking 750 gigs of file size on something like a Phantom, you're talking how many seconds worth of real time that you're recording? Days of playback?
Yeah, that's the scale of seconds to days of slow-mo, especially if you're going for like the million FPS stuff, though. I definitely think the 1,000 FPS would be pretty cool.
Gavin Free, if you're watching out there, slow-mo guys, NSF collab, hit us up.
Let's do it.
I'm down. Let's do it.
Yes. Couple good questions from John here. John Cook asking, first, how many pounds of gear do you take to a launch?
You want to go first, D?
I think I did a little bit of math of it. So I think my cameras, each of them is around 3 to 4 pounds. And I've got 5 that I use primarily at this point. It's a 14-pound primary lens. I think this telescope is about 10 pounds. Then we have to consider the tripods. I don't know. These batteries, it's a lot. Because it's 2 of these basically per camera. And these are 220 watt hours, I think, off the top of my head. So I'll just say I know for a fact when I flew to Flight 4, I had 170 pounds of gear with me. And that was packing light.
It all adds up super quick. Super quick. I remember when, because I had to check, I think 2 or 3 bags going to New Zealand. Oh boy, I think in total, it was around also 170, 180 pounds between everything. Because I brought out all the stops. Because like it's not every day that you're granted an opportunity to go to New Zealand, to the Mahia Peninsula with Rocket Lab and shoot Electron. So brought out everything I possibly could, and it totaled to around like 180 pounds between all bags. In terms of what we bring for just our live streams, it really depends. If we take the robotic head out of the equation, probably anywhere from like 50 to 70, 80 pounds between or each of us. The actual head alone is around like 100 between the tripod and the head itself. It's around like what? 100 pounds? D, do you remember?
I don't remember. I think it weighed, it was at least like 60 pounds
Okay.
for the robotic head itself. Plus, there's so much auxiliary equipment, whether it's, if we're right out front running a spool of fiber optic cable for the best possible connection and to have all our cameras wired, whether it's the batteries for the pact so that we can send signals. Yeah, there's way more than I can think of.
It's a lot of mass. TLDR, it's a lot of mass.
It's a lot. It's a lot. My car has a driver's seat that is accessible in it, and the rest of it is all camera gear.
And by the way, we were talking about pounds and weight, Ryan Caton in the back channel, not pounds sterling. Thank you. Also, he wants to know launch day snack. I'm just going to go out and say Julia Bergeron's cookies in a way to hopefully get her to bake some more the next time that I come up for a launch.
Cookies and brownies. Julia's brownies in particular are just amazing. Like we were out for the last mission from 39A, as you remember, and she just randomly like came up to us and brought us like food and brownies, and it was just like Julia is
so nice.
She is a dime. She is amazing. We could not be more thankful. We wish she could come out more often, but we're so thankful whenever she does.
Absolutely. They are delicious, by the way.
The other snack I think that's worth mentioning is the energy drinks. Yeah. I wasn't going to name a brand. Hashtag not sponsored.
Red Bull, sponsor us.
Oh, God, no. By the way, I do want to mention while we're getting ready for This Week in Spaceflight coming up momentarily, we did have an update from SpaceX on X, the Everything app. Check this out.
Ooh.
Speaking the bird that just flew through that frame. Oh.
Sheesh.
Absolutely beautiful. And I do want to point out the caption going with it. After flying to a peak altitude of about 90 kilometers, traveling more than 60 kilometers downrange from Starbase, and completing its boost back burn and coast, Super Heavy ignited its landing burn less than 40 meters away from the pre-flight target. The Raptor engines and booster guidance system precisely maneuvered the vehicle through the highest wind speeds yet for a Super Heavy landing burn. Upgrades to the chopstick controls enabled them to start wider and move earlier for catch, expanding the envelope for booster landing burn trajectories.
I don't think that was slow-mo.
It wasn't,
I think it's just that good.
Yeah, it seemed like it was, but no, it's not. That's unbelievable.
I think one of the most valuable pieces of info that we got from this flight, similar to Flight 4, is that SpaceX, I guess, unintentionally demonstrated the fact that they can perform a successful boost back with an engine out. And on Flight 4, when they first attempted a soft splashdown, I shouldn't say first attempted, but when they first nailed a soft splashdown in the Gulf, they lost an engine on the way down for the landing burn, and they still managed to have it splash down in the Gulf where they wanted it to. So they have now twice demonstrated the ability to land the booster and also perform a boost back burn -1 Raptor, which is very key.
Kevin, you got to play the third one, if you don't mind. This is the one that I think is absolutely the most stunning view. Check it out, onboard camera. Oh, look at that with the engine, with the vapor cone there. I love it. I mean, I could watch this stuff all day, and I can guarantee, I have a feeling that we'll be going into these views and the landing a bit more, maybe on Starbase update coming out one day, if I had to guess.
The view of the landing pin.
Look at that.
Just walks itself right in.
That is glorious. Absolutely stunning views from SpaceX that they tweeted out just a short time ago. Wow. So yeah, we're seeing them the first time you guys are here too. It is absolutely amazing. And don't forget, we've got the latest coming up Monday with Starbase update on everything Starbase. But if you want to know everything going on this week in Spaceflight, well, then you should watch This Week in Spaceflight coming up in just a minute from now. You don't even have to leave here. We will redirect you right to it. So before we do, I want to thank everyone that joined here today. I mean, this is my dream to be able to do this with the whole CAPE team, some of the best people in the business, and it's my honor to work with you out in the field. Dee, thank you.
Oh, thank you. This was a great chat. And once again, what a launch.
And Max, I guess you're all right. No, I'm kidding. I love working with you too, man, so thank you.
Oh, I didn't hear my name. Are you talking to me, Sawyer?
Fine, I won't call you awesome then. It's all right.
Okay, no, it's fine. It's cool. Honestly, it's always so fun being able to nerd out with everyone who you're able to watch these launches with. And thank you very much, everyone, for coming to hang out with us and just listen to us nerd out, talking about cameras and talking about tracking launches and just about the various things that all go into it. Because there's a lot more that happens behind the scenes that a lot of people just don't see. But it is an absolute privilege to share it with every single one of you, and of course having you two on to talk about it as well. It's always fun.
Yep, and also Jack, by the way, thank you for getting a D photo from the shop at shop.nasaspaceflight.com as well, saying thanks NSF for bringing us all the great coverage. Thank you, Kevin Michael Reed, for pushing the buttons and pulling the levers to help bring the coverage both for the New Glenn launch and for today's Flame Trench. A huge thank you as well to our launch directors and flight engineers. Without them, I mean, we can't do what we do without support from people like you. So thank you all very much. These are the highest levels of support that we have out there, and I'm still amazed at how many names are on there every time, so I appreciate it. I am Sawyer Rosenstein. I have been your host for today's The Flame Trench. Now let's head on over to the This Week in Spaceflight. Twists coming up next.
And here we go. We have liftoff.
Propulsion continues to be nominal.
RS-68 chamber pressure looks good.
Doubling up. Roger, planet. Water towers, fly! Yes! Echo down to nominal.
Fighting downside SPD off.
SPD off.
It's orange!
R45. Oh my god! Oh my god!
Decollage.
Look at this!
Put that in the big bag, Signal.
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
This methane is